welcome to our panel session, Sustainability and Defence, Unlikely Allies. Thank you for choosing this session as opposed to Miliband downstairs. We'll try to keep it much more interesting and much more exciting. I think fascinating topics. To those of us working in and around the sector, the two topics feel relevant to each other. They feel related, and we're all working on ways to improve sustainability and defence and thinking about the impact of defence on sustainability more broadly. But perhaps in the wider population, the two seem separate, disconnected, or perhaps even conflicting. In defence is typically about peace and prosperity and national security. Sustainability is about securing a supply chain or environmental concerns, and those two things can be conflicting. I'm joined by three fantastic panel members today. I'll hand over turn in turn for you to introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Samira Braund. I'm the Defence Director at ADS. ADS is the national trade body for aerospace, defence, space and security, and we represent over 1,300 members. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexandra Howe. I'm Deputy Director for Climate Change and Environment at the UK Ministry of Defence.
And I'm Kata Escott. I'm the UK country head for Airbus Defence and Space.
Thank you. So look, we're going to propose to split the discussion up into 3 or 4 main topics, and at the end we'll invite your questions and your challenges. Those topics are going to be as follows. Number 1, how defence and sustainability are related, just getting a baseline. Number 2 is just a quick status check. What's the current status of that sustainability defence axis? Number 3 is more thinking around some of the solutions that industry, end users, militaries, policymakers are working on and working towards. And then finally, just with a bit of a look ahead, what are the opportunities we face? What are some of the challenges that industry and militaries are going to be coming up against? So maybe let's kick things off. First, pretty open question. How do the two topics of defence and sustainability intertwine? How are they related at more than just a surface level? Maybe, Alex, you want to take us off?
Sure, I can kick us off there. So I feel like I'm going to dispel everything in the title of the event as well instantly. I don't think that they're unlikely allies. Actually, defence and sustainability are very intertwined, and there might be conflict in some ways, but actually it's really important that we talk about them together. I think it's generally widely accepted now by governments and militaries around the world that climate change, environment, sustainability are key aspects that we should be considering when we're thinking about defence as a whole. I also think that defence probably has 2 parts to the challenge. So when I talk about the UK Ministry of Defence, we have a massive kind of a sustainability, environmental, climate change footprint within the UK. But that's much like any big business within the UK. So we have impacts across our estate in terms of heating, where our people live, in terms of the transport we use within the UK as well. And then there's also that wider kind of international footprint as well. And that is really kind of part of the problem. I think we're going to touch on this a little bit in the next session as well, but also thinking about actually in terms of what actually does it mean to be working in defence if we have militaries deployed around the world? How will they need to change what they're doing? So thinking about actually the interplay between sustainability, climate change and defence, it's going to impact on where we're operating. So where are going to be the flashpoints in the future? Where are we going to see those environmental impacts coming into the fore? Actually kind of understanding who we're working with as well. So we will see kind of these environmental impacts happening in different countries around the world. So is that going to change our perspective on how we need to operate? It's going to change what we use as well. And I know my colleagues here are going to talk a little bit about some of the kind of industrial perspectives and some of the different technologies we need to take forward as well. But also kind of really understanding kind of the role we play and how we take that forward. So I think they're not unlikely allies, but it's a really complicated relationship, and we really need to focus on that to drive it forwards.
Right.
Kata, what do you think?
Yeah, I might just build on that a little bit. To take it up, I really agree with what you said, by the way, but to take it up a level, when you think about the 2 big challenges facing the planet at the moment, I would describe them as climate change and the threat of war. And if you're not going to deal with those things together as a system, then I think you're going to be in a difficult place. So I think we have to think about these 2 things together as sort of intertwined, exactly as you described. Sometimes we think about sustainability and defence as sort of 2 sides of the same coin. So we know that climate change is going to drive instability in terms of competition for scarce resources or migration and so on. And as a member of the sort of defence community, from an industry perspective, we're very well incentivised, therefore, to think about how we can work with our partners to tackle some of those drivers of instability. So, defence's response to that challenge. On the flip side, you absolutely have to have stability, which defence can bring, if you want to have a sensible conversation about sustainability. The sort of international order, difficult not to talk in cliches sometimes, but this is a global problem and it needs a global solution. So having a sort of stability in the international system where you can have some of those discussions about solutions to tackle some of those sustainability problems is absolutely essential as well. So I absolutely agree. I think these two things are very interrelated, and I agree also that it is more. This has come to the fore more in recent years. I think it perhaps was less prominent in the past, but it's certainly at the forefront of the work that I've been doing on defence over recent years. And in Airbus, as part of our submission, it'd be make sure we're contributing to that sustainable goal.
Makes sense, and I can echo the sort of rising prominence of the topic in the defence discussion from my own observations of the last 5, 10, 15 years. Maybe for a bit of context, Samira, just talk us through where are we today, right? What's the challenge? Why are we coming from a place where perhaps sustainability was lower on the agenda in the past, whether in reality or in perception, and what's changing?
So I think there's quite a few challenges that we need to think about. There's a narrative challenge, there's a skills challenge, and there's an investment challenge. I mean, from a narrative perspective, defence hasn't really been good at telling its story on actually the activities that we do more broadly outside of what some of the general public feel is just hard-edged lethality. And actually there's a broader piece that we do for security, prosperity, aid. And so for us to better display and share the narrative on the value of what defence brings to the UK economy is absolutely key. The incredible contribution that defence has brought from a technology perspective into the sustainability environment, from sustainable aviation fuels to technologies that have helped us create some satellite applications that allow us to monitor emissions across the world. Without defence, those sorts of technologies wouldn't be available. And then from a skills perspective, currently within our sector, we employ over 149,000 people. It's absolutely significant amounts. And that includes just under 7,000 apprentices. But we recognise that there is a skills gap, and we need to look at, as a number of sectors have, we need to look at having a greater variety and diversity of individuals into the defence enterprise, and bringing that objective thinking and that change thinking into our sector is absolutely key, and ensuring that we have greater collaboration across industry, government and academia to better understand, the real challenges that we have and how we can address them collectively, and to demonstrate why it's a great place to work in defence. There's some really exciting technologies that we deliver which has dual use. And then from an investment perspective, I think innovation requires investment. There's a misalignment between certain ESG criteria and the investment into defence. We're a firm believer that we are an ethical sector to invest in, and we welcome the government's backing, but we need to create a greater education for those investors to help us understand our sector more specifically. I suppose when we look at what's changed, much of the problem is perception, and we need to recognise where we can improve it, and we recognise that, and that's why it's wonderful to see the initiatives that are being delivered across government through the Ministry of Defence, us as a trade association trying to lead the charge in many of these areas. But skills attraction is key, and I think it does come down to people. If you look at the generations that are coming through into defence now, they are looking for an employer that has sustainability values, They are looking for an employer that goes over and above on social value and bringing value to wider communities. And we need to demonstrate what good corporate social responsibility we have. And a number of our members, have these qualities, but we're just not very good at telling our story. And I think why now the illegal invasion in Ukraine has actually opened up perception of the value of defence and actually what a great cause it is to drive prosperity back into the UK and for sustainability.
And people are starting to see, right, the more circular impact of defence and peace and conflict on broader supply chains that enable sustainability. So I summarise that a bit as there are challenges around skills, there are challenges around innovation and frameworks that enable that. There are challenges around perception and the way we as an industry or broader sector communicate to the wider world. I think both of you have got some.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to build. I very much agree with your point about perception, but I think that is really changing now, given the sort of geopolitical situation we find ourselves in, with Putin on right on the borders of NATO. I think that has really made defence feel relevant to the citizens of the UK in a way that I don't think it was some years before. So I agree.
I think 2 points for me. So just on the perception and the relevance point, I think that is really critical as we move forward. And I don't think people join defence because they don't agree with any of these things. It's more about you joining because it is that impact you have on the world. You want to make the world a better place. That's why people join our military at the moment within the UK and around the world. So I think it's really harnessing that and understanding what I guess Gen Z, etc., are going to come and bring to the fore and what their asks are going to be as an employer moving forwards. And then I also think on the challenges side, one of the other things I think that we struggle with in defence is that ability to move quickly in terms of some of the changes that are coming down the line. So, for example, the energy transition is going to be a really difficult one for defence to go through as a whole, as a global industry. And it's really about understanding kind of the constraints, the new technology as they emerge and applying them as quickly as we can, but making sure we remain in that space where we still have interoperability moving forward so that we can work effectively across the globe. We understand actually if we turn up in a port, we can use the fuel that's being supplied there so we can carry out the work that we're still doing moving forward. And it's about bringing that all together. And I think that's everybody moving as one, which makes it, I think, even more challenging.
And I just add, just from my own, perspectives, I think defence industry has not been ignoring this topic historically. If you look at subsequent platforms, aircraft and vehicles, you see massive improvements in fuel efficiency and so on from generation to generation. It's just perhaps that's not been top of the list to talk about. So I think the industry is used to making progress, is getting better at learning to talk about it. And one of Samira's points around investment as well, I've seen things like, ESG-linked credit lines for defence companies starting to come in. So I think we might see more and more of that. But I guess thinking more broadly now, what are some of the most interesting solutions to some of these challenges that industry, militaries, supply chains, policymakers are working on? Maybe, Kata, you start?
Sure. Well, I think from an Airbus perspective, we talk about our footprints and our handprints. And perhaps this model is very familiar to you all already, but when we're thinking about our footprint, we're thinking about how to limit the damage that we're putting on the planet by the business that we run. Like any big organisation, as you say, we've been thinking about this sort of thing for some time, but it's sort of growing in importance for us and a big priority for our company. The sorts of things that we're working on, you mentioned already sustainable aviation fuels. We've done already a good deal of testing. We're investing quite heavily into ensuring we can understand what that technology can bring for us. We've done our first test of 100% SAF fuel flights last year, and we're doing that. We're really sort of working on that at the moment, with a view to having all of our aircraft capable of using SAF by 2030. So this is quite an ambitious target for a technology which is still very much emerging. On footprints as well, another example is what we do in space, where we're thinking about when we design our satellites and launch them, we're not just thinking about how we launch them into space and what they're going to do from space, but we design them thinking now about their kind of whole of life and what will happen to the end of at the end of life, how we're going to deorbit those satellites so we don't contribute to space junk and that sort of thing. So we're really trying to build this into the heart of our planning when it comes to our footprint. But actually, perhaps more interesting for this audience is the handprints. And this is thinking about how our products and services can really more proactively support sustainability goals more directly. And here we think about how we can both prevent, protect and restore the environments that we're working in. So to bring that to life a little bit in terms of prevention, Samira, you mentioned the stuff we can do from space. We've got these fantastic capabilities where we can observe the Earth and gather data about deforestation, about sea levels, about global warming, to understand better what these trends are and predict, therefore, where we might be suffer damage. Of course, prevention, we're not so naive to think that prevention is going to work entirely. So we also have to think about how we can protect and restore where we do see damage, both in terms of human and ecological. And in the context of sort of protect and restore, I think more about our sort of harder military edge. We have our fast jets flying right now on the eastern flanks of NATO, keeping people safe and deterring Russian aggression. We use our A400Ms in humanitarian context, so we've supported the armed forces, I should say, in the aftermath of the earthquakes in Turkey and in the evacuation from Afghanistan. And then we're also very active in terms of, sort of ecologically speaking as well, there's sort of climate catastrophes, how we can support our partners in sort of restoring the ecosystem, both in terms of people and planet. So there's a great deal that we're working on in terms of both our footprints, minimizing our footprints, but also more proactively contributing to sustainability through that prevent, restore model. So.
And Samira, maybe from ADS side, right? I guess you'll have visibility of, more than 1,000 member companies. You're also doing your own initiatives and efforts around sustainability. How do you see that landscape of solutions developing?
So from an ADS perspective, what we're trying to do is how we can actually shape and inform policy to make it better for all of our members. And ESG is at the forefront of that. And before we launched our ESG charter, we had some quite disturbing roundtables with our SMEs around how they can't even get access to finance because they're a defence organisation to put the investment into some of the sustainability initiatives. So that kind of was the part of the underpinning reasons of why we really need to focus around how do we improve the attractiveness of the sector and how do we educate our investors. So we launched our ESG charter back in January this year with 7 of the large leading primes as the inaugural signatories. These are the charter is really focused in 3 areas around climate transition and clean technology, societal impact and governance. And really what we're trying to do is to get a baseline reporting around what great corporate citizens defence is to better demonstrate the value that we bring. And that's absolutely fundamental because that then pulls across into some of our other service offerings in ADS through our supply chain solutions, where we can provide toolkits to our members around how they can improve their own ESG reporting and ensure that they've got the right processes and frameworks and they have the right thinking. And I think that's the thought leadership that we need to drive. We were really pleased to see the PM speech in Poland last week on the increase in defence spending up to 2.5% to GDP. And actually behind that announcement was a supporting document called Defending Britain. And in that document actually announced the launch of the Treasury-backed ESG task force with ADS, which is absolutely fantastic that now, through the work that we've done with our members, has actually raised up to another level. And that Treasury task force is informed by our members from primes all the way down to mid-tiers and SMEs, cross-government. So it's really important to ensure that we have alignment across all government departments and investors, more importantly, to better understand where they're coming from. And then we build upon from that. The last year at REAPS, we collectively signed the Defence Supplies Forum, which is the leading conduit between MOD and industry, the Defence Aviation Net Zero Charter. So currently, just a little statistic for you. So defence aviation emissions currently represent approximately 60% of MOD's operational capability emissions. So it's quite a significant amount. So this is a key focus that we have, across the defence enterprise, and committing to that, and through the work that Airbus have been leading on sustainable aviation fuel and other partners, it really is going to drive a significant impact.
Good. So I think we've heard lots of solutions all around this circle of defence and sustainability, right? We're thinking about solutions within the supply chain, reducing emissions from the supply chain. We're thinking about solutions of how we talk about the role of defence in enabling a more safe, secure, sustainable world. Maybe I'll just wrap up with the last question to the panel before we go to wider Q&A. Maybe it's for Alex, right? So we talked about solutions, we talked about the context, we talked about where we've come from. What do you see in future being, the next challenge or the next opportunity, and what's the kind of big things that we've got to tackle?
Okay, so I think I'll think of one opportunity and one challenge going forwards. So I think the challenge at the moment, I think Samira and Kata have already talked about this a bit, is really kind of getting to grips and really understanding kind of the emissions associated with defence, how we're reporting it all, and that's something that we've really focused on trying to develop. We're getting better, but it's not perfect at the moment, so we are, from a Ministry of Defence perspective, reporting through our annual accounts and reports our carbon emissions, so we've been doing that, I think, since 2010. But that data is getting better and more accurate, and it gives us that handle to really understand where those emissions are coming from and where we should be targeting our focus. I think as we move forward, what we're trying to do, and maybe this is the opportunity and my challenge as well, is to build that information into it. So when we're working with suppliers, when we're commissioning new ships, new airplanes, new bases, that we are looking at a whole life cycle cost of carbon, for example, and building that into our acquisitions process to really make sure we're forcing that behavioural change. And then I think in terms of the opportunity, I think we've mentioned this quite a few times on the panel, that this is a global challenge, and that's really the opportunity here. There's a real advantage to work with our international partners and allies in this space. And for example, last year a setup was the NATO Centre of Excellence for Climate Change, and that's been a real focal point, and it's just in its initial stages. We've just gone through the first year cycle of that, but really kind of bringing that thinking together across defence organisations from around the NATO community and beyond, to really make sure that we're doing this collectively, we're making decisions that can work effectively for everyone.
I mean, I think I would echo that. Partnership was my big theme for the next set of challenges. I think we're very good at talking about partnership, and we've done an awful lot to take ourselves forwards. I think, the excellent work that Samira is talking about in terms of the task force on ESG, the many initiatives that you have referenced as well, both on an international context and in a UK context. But really, bedding in these collaborations and making sure that they're working, I think, is the key thing. Because without industry, talking to government, talking to academia, and making shared plans to take this stuff forward, we're just going to keep stalling and keep having the same conversation. Airbus, we are obviously a sort of main, the UK's major prime in space, and therefore feel a responsibility as much as anything else, and work right across the sector to make sure that we can amplify our voice on this particular issue, and make sure that, as you described, there's a whole system that needs to operate here in a cohesive way. And so I'm very proud of the work that Airbus has done to kind of lead that challenge, particularly on sustainable aviation fuels, but on this whole wider debate as well. And I think that's true across the UK, but internationally, as you say, as well, and in the various organisations you mentioned.
Thank you to the panelists. I believe we've got 5 minutes or so for any questions from the audience. I don't know if there's a microphone going around. Seems like there is.
Thank you. I'm here. My name is Alistair Johnson. I'm here on the behalf of the International Windship Association. And one of the things about putting sails or wind assist devices on merchant ships is that they have to travel very slowly. Slow steaming is a fundamental part of it. So we always joke that, well, no defence, no navy is going to have them because they're not going to advertise how slowly their ships are moving. Surprise to us, we were invited to an online conference with the head of the US Navy's Disruptive Technologies Lab. And he said, right, well, unless we're actually going into battle or on a time-critical mission, we can patrol very slowly. And he rounded out by saying it's not a matter of if, but when the US Navy has wind assist on its vessels. So the issue with that is that it sends a very strong public message about your commitment to reducing emissions. I think there are probably just around 300 surface ships in the world's navies, but it's kind of an anecdote, but if you have any thoughts, I'd be interested to hear.
I could have a go first of all. I think I recognize what you're saying, and I would say, looking at the way the US DoD has broken up its organization and is innovating, it's getting very good at that, especially with regard to some of the new technologies. I recall a paper from 1995 where they were looking at aircraft carriers generating their own synthetic aviation fuel, right? So I think my observation, which obviously never got beyond idea stage, as far as I'm aware, but I would observe that the US is pretty good in some areas at taking a concept, innovating, trying it out, and then take it forward or kill it. So maybe there's some things that we can learn.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I really agree with your points on a clear communication. This is going to be absolutely essential to driving innovation in this space. And I think that's why it's so great to see in the Ministry of Defence how this is, as you described it, has gone from being a sort of an important issue to like right up there on the sort of top table. And the message that sends to industry is really important for us to drive investment. It helps our whole ecosystem as well to have confidence that this is a thing that's going to, has a future and is important for the country.
And I think that we are trying to really clearly send that signal as well. So we're really interested in understanding kind of the projects that are taking place. Obviously, why it's important to work collectively as well. So we work very closely, for example, with the US DoD as well in terms of understanding the work that they're doing, and then we can share ideas and information as we develop the strategies moving forward. I think shipping is a notoriously difficult sector as well, just to decarbonise as a whole. So we're really always looking for kind of those interesting innovations as well.
So our policy at the moment, what we're trying to do is develop the deepest, broadest stakeholder network so that we can create a disruptive, collaborative entity to, in effect, de-risk and collectivize the infrastructural costs of wind assist because at the moment, the end user has to pay for the infrastructure and the installation and everything. So if we have a very broad stakeholder network, that collectivizes the risk and makes it much more obviously competitive to hydrocarbons and any other alternative combustibles. The point is that on their own, wind assist devices are 12 times more effective in terms of thrust per unit of mass, simply because they don't have to carry their own energy source. The energy is delivered free at the point of use.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Winfred. I work with KN. First, I want to say I'm very glad to see 3 ladies there, so it's inspiring. And just a real quick question about waste in defense. How do you tackle the challenge of having, waste in other countries, for example, in third world countries where their reporting is not as updated as maybe Europe and the UK?
Do you want to explain that one? So I think waste is a really critical issue, and I think one we haven't yet touched on as a panel, so really thank you for bringing it up as well. I think it's really important that we're taking into account and we're looking at kind of the life cycle of the products we use as well. So we talk a lot about it within the UK environment and what the kind of the waste profile is, but when we deploy overseas and when we're working around the globe, it's really important that we do everything that we can that retains our license to operate. So we're moving in a direction now where likely we could see kind of international law changing and looking at how we deploy in different kind of regions, different areas. So we really should be thinking about a leave no trace approach and looking at how we work with local communities as well in terms of upskilling and understanding about how we work collectively to minimize that impact too. But that's something we've got a number of projects that are going on as well. But I think we might touch on some of those things in the next panel, so I will leave that for now. But do stay for it.
So another question. Very helpful, right?
Hi, Anne Straw from Kinetic. I wanted to ask about, you've talked a lot about collaboration and communication and working globally. And my question was about pan-domain. Naturally, because of the makeup of the panel, we've talked a lot about air. My focus is maritime. You've already said, Alex, how difficult the maritime area is. And I guess how are both industry and the MOD facilitating that collaboration between domains so that we can learn from each other and bring innovations from other areas across the domains.
I can start.
Go ahead, Samira.
So it's a really good question, and I think that there's a couple of things. Obviously, I appreciate some of the challenges with some of the pan-domain areas, but I think it also links back to the critical minerals strategy and manufacturing more broadly, and actually how we can be more sustainable through the life cycle. When we look at how we build that alignment piece, I think there's a couple of things. Obviously, you may have read in the Prime Minister's announcement around the new Defence Innovation Agency. And so if we take the work that Stratcom are doing in the Integrated Design Authority, which is looking pan-domain, and actually aligning that with our defence innovation and our S&T and our R&D and the work that DSTL does, I think we're going to have a much more coherent approach. The thing is, we haven't got lots of new money, so we need to spend wisely. And actually, there's so many synergies across pan-domain with a slight different edge of how they want to use that capability. But the baseline, and that's why it's really important to have interoperability, interchangeability, and actually how we build that into NATO standards as well.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, so that collaboration aspect, as you said, is really critical, and that's something that we're trying to do kind of with industry partners, but also across government as well. So we have working closely with the Department for Transport as well in terms of understanding, looking at what changes might come for commercial shipping as well as, and how that might relate back then to kind of our naval kind of approach too. So I think really useful that we do that. We also, I think, Samira, you mentioned earlier as well, so we have a Defence Suppliers Forum, and underneath that we have a Climate Change and Sustainability group as part of that kind of sits and then talks about some of these questions as well. But you're right, it's something that we could do better.
And I'd observe that sort of putting hard walls between silos is going to be increasingly difficult, not just for this reason with, autonomous platforms, with, new different types of warfare, in, dealing with that. It's going to be harder and harder to operate in very rigid silos. Any more questions? The last one sneaking in.
Hi, it's a quick one. I'm Joel Rogers. I work for Rolls-Royce. I'm on the Engineering and Technology Graduate Scheme. Back in 2021, I think the MOD, this might be a question for you, Alex, the MOD set 30% of their white fleet vehicles to be replaced by electric vehicles by 2023. And seeing as we're in 2024, I was wondering how far along that trajectory the MOD are. If you don't have the answer, don't worry. But also, is there any sort of future outlook looking at more of a 100% change to EVs over the next few years? Yeah.
So that's something that we're working on across the defence estate at the moment, and we have made some progress, but it has been tricky in terms of getting the right charging points, etc., in place to make sure we're making that change. But we are signed up to the Greening Government commitments as well. So as a part of collectively UK government, all of the different departments have targets that we set, and as part of that, we're really working towards this objective. So hopefully we will make the target. I'll try and find out the exact figure for you as well, but I don't know right now.
I think we need to.
Okay.
I'm afraid we have to wrap up this session. So I'm not sure if we have any more time for the questions on stage, but I'm quite sure that our moderators will be moderator and speakers would be happy to answer your questions after the session. We have a very small break for 5 minutes, and the next session will have a very similar focus. It will be called Why does climate change and sustainability matter to defense? So don't go far, stay here, and continue enjoying Innovation Zero. Thank you. Thank you very much.